Joining us now on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline, a celebrated analyst of the college football and national champion from ESPN, Trevor Matich. Trevor, happy Monday, man. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
What was your initial reaction last Monday when you learned that Ty Detmer had been relieved of his offensive coordinator duties at BYU?
Man, I was saddened. I know that there's got to be accountability because of the nature of what happened last year on offense, but I don't think you can pin it really on Ty Detmer. I think that last year he showed you that he can coach the up-tempo running quarterback style with Taysom Hill and then Jamal Williams running the ball. This year he didn't have those guys, and he shifted back to what he really wanted to do, which is a drop-back pro-style passing game, which will work in college football as long as you've got the people to do it. Problem is that he had a whole bunch of injuries at quarterback and running back to start with, and it changed what he could do. It changed the execution of the offense, and it made it easier for defenses to defend him because of all those injured guys. And so he wasn't able to really transition back to what they were doing last year because the only quarterback on the roster that could do it was Bo Hodge. And when he got in there against Utah State, he got hurt. So I think all of these things were a perfect storm that conspired against the BYU offense having a chance to really maximize its potential. And somebody has to pay the price. And Ty Detmer's been around football long enough to know that when you're the offensive coordinator, that's where the buck stops.
Someone had to take the fall, and it ends up being BYU's only Heisman Trophy winner in Ty Detmer. It's kind of a weird deal, Trevor, because there's this emotional connection for every single BYU fan to Ty Detmer. Yet Ty the player, to me, is different than Ty the coach. Yet I was still surprised as well.
Yes, and I think BYU fans should be very careful how to evaluate Ty Detmer as a coach. I think it's easy to say great player, failure as a coordinator, but don't say he's a great player. He was an outstanding coordinator last year. This year, he didn't all of a sudden forget how to coach. So I think it's important for people to understand that Ty Detmer is a class act. He's a guy that loves BYU and will only do and say the right things. And I think he's kind of taking one for the team here by not speaking out about certain things that I have mentioned. And I think that's another reason why fans need to look at Ty Detmer with nothing but respect and admiration, even though last year did not go well.
ESPN's Trevor Matich with us on BYU Sports Nation. Whoever the new offensive coordinator is in Provo, what do you feel needs to be at the top of their attribute list?
Well, the top of the list is to be a teacher. You've got to be able to teach the game, not just the scheme, but how to execute the fundamentals of football. You've got to be able to teach that not just to the players, but to your assistant coaches, because they need to be on the same page as well with what you're trying to do. In other words, if the offensive coordinator has a certain scheme, the offensive line coach needs to make sure the techniques he's teaching fit that scheme. So that's one of the attributes. He needs to be creative, to be able to adapt to personnel. Different personnel require different circumstances and different kinds of play calling from the offensive coordinator. But I think ultimately it's an opportunity for Kalani Sitake, the head coach, to decide who they want to be offensively. Because all of a sudden now he can choose if they want to remain with the pro style or if they want to go to the up-tempo spread running quarterback style that they were a year ago and that most of college football is doing now. And whoever is the offensive coordinator, whoever he comes in, they should make sure that the decision is made with a long-term perspective and not a short-term perspective. Because if they do decide to go with the running quarterback style, next year they don't have the guys that can really do that very well except for Hodge. So the new offensive coordinator will need to still adapt to more of a pocket passing style as he transitions into what he really wants to do, if that's what Kalani Sitake wants the identity to be. So really, to me, the big picture thing here is we have a real opportunity to see what vision Kalani Sitake wants for BYU offense in the long term going forward.
Trevor, I don't know if there is a long term. If BYU is going to fire or relieve Ty Detmer of his offensive coordinator duties, to me it seems like the leash is pretty short in the long term should BYU struggle. So does BYU need immediate results this next year, like make a bowl game?
That would be nice, but BYU's history, especially with head coaches, is to stay with them and commit to them long term. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think BYU understands that the mission of the football team is integrated with the mission of the university and of the church to be ambassadors for what they all stand for. And there are very few potential head coaches alive on the planet today that would even qualify to be the BYU head coach, much less be good enough to actually get the job. So I think BYU is slow to put the hook to a head coach, and I truthfully think that Kalani Sitake is the right man and the right coach going forward long term. I can see him, if he can get through this time of turmoil and get that offense settled down and going, I can see him being here for 10 or 20 years if he wants to. I think he is that good, and I think he has that kind of potential. And BYU is not quick to dump coaches because of a bad season.
Number one item on the agenda list, obviously, for BYU football is to lock in their offensive coordinator. We'll see how the position coaches fall after that. High on your list of agenda items is the college football playoff, Trevor. Quite simply, did the committee get it right with the 4 teams they put in?
Well, they did get the best 4 teams. You know, the big controversy was Ohio State versus Alabama. And Alabama's the better team. I think the Alabama-Clemson matchup in the semifinal in the Rose Bowl is a dream matchup.
Yes.
And even saying that, I think the committee got it wrong.
Okay.
Because in order to put Alabama in, they had to sacrifice something else. And you've got advantages and disadvantages for both of those teams. So let's look at what they sacrificed. The advantage of Alabama was that they only had 1 loss, even though they didn't win their own conference. Ohio State had 2 losses. Now, if the Buckeyes had 3 losses, I wouldn't be saying what I'm about to say, but 2 losses compared to 1 is right there neck and neck. The second loss for Ohio State was a bad loss, getting blown out by unranked Iowa. So that's in favor of Alabama. But on the Ohio State side of the ledger, they have 2 advantages. One is that they beat 3 teams that are better than anybody that Alabama beat this year, according to the committee. The second advantage is that they won their conference. They're Big Ten champs. So you've got to decide which is more important to you, conference champion and 3 higher quality wins, or that 1 bad loss. And I think that the committee last year, by putting Ohio State in as a non-champ over champion Penn State, and then this year doing what they did, I think they are diminishing the value of conference championships. I think they've made conference championship races largely irrelevant on the national level, and I think that's sad for college football. Because now, if you're not in the playoff, you know, people don't really care. It's not that big a deal. Yeah, we won our conference, but we're not in the playoff. That's the way it is now. If they expand to 8, and now I am firmly in the camp of expanding to 8, because if they expand to 8, you get 5 Power 5 champions plus 3 at large. That means that, for example, Stanford in the Pac-12 this year with 3 losses, if they had beat USC, they're in, regardless of the 3 losses. And then a team like an Alabama has a chance to get in at 11-1 without winning their conference as well. But what that does is maintains the value of conference championship races. It keeps people in every region of the country passionately interested in what's happening, not just as a regional sideshow, but from a national impact. And that, to me, is better for college football. This whole concept of get the 4 best teams in regardless of whether they win their conference, that's fine, but at what expense? The expense has been, according to the committee spokesman over the last 2 years, they have said that conference championship is a tiebreaker to use only at the very end of the process, only if you can't differentiate teams by other means. I think that's not an expense I'm willing to pay. I think that conference championships must be respected, even at the expense of maybe having a team in that might not be the best team, because it's better for college football. Therefore, I think that they got the better team in with Alabama over Ohio State. But I don't think Alabama's unequivocally better than Ohio State, and I think the conference championship devaluation is something I wish had not happened.
It's a harsh reality for teams like Ohio State and even Penn State last year. Trevor, fascinating stuff. We appreciate the national insight, and we are very, very anxiously awaiting what happens when the college football realignment with the TV rights happens in 2024 to see how all of this goes down.
Yep, and in saying all that, guys, let me just, this is important. I respect the committee as a whole. I respect each individual member, and I think they are doing their very best and they're doing it with great integrity. I just see differently the criteria that they value. That's where I stand.
Clearly understood. Trevor, we appreciate the time. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks, guys.